Hi there, welcome back. In today's lecture we're going to be looking at the area of neuromuscular agents. What we're talking specifically here about are the drugs that work at the skeletal neuromuscular junction, rather than neuromuscular in terms of any neuron working on any other muscle. So it's specifically skeletal neuromuscular junction. So a little bit of a refresher here over basic skeletal neuromuscular function. Basically what we're talking about here is that contact point between a motor neuron and a skeletal muscle fibre. Similar in structure to a synapse where one neuron talks to another, so the first neuron releases a neurotransmitter and the second postsynaptic structure responds to that. Here though, what we're looking at specifically is the end bulb of the neuron, the synaptic end bulb, which is filled with acetylcholine vesicles. We know it's acetylcholine because the neurotransmitter at the skeletal neuromuscular junction controlling the motor activity of our body is always acetylcholine releasing. And then we have the synaptic gap or the cleft. Sometimes you'll see that referred to as the neuromuscular junction. And then we have the motor end plate, which is the area of the muscle that is going to respond to the released neurotransmitter. So what we're talking about here then is, this is a motor neuron here. Standard cell body, nucleus, etc. Axon, where the action potential will fire down, gets to the terminal. Terminal is filled with vesicles, and the vesicles are filled with acetylcholine, which is released. Now the way that works is, this neuron has to be firing in order for the acetylcholine to be released. So action potential generation up here, propagation of the action potential. Now the action potential and the propagation of the action potential both involve the, if you like, the sort of sequential movement of sodium, influx of sodium followed by efflux of potassium to give you the standard peak that you get with an action potential. Excuse me. Once it gets down to the terminal here, the presence of the action potential influences the influx of calcium, and the influx of calcium here promotes the release of the neurotransmitter by the process known as exocytosis. And that's what we're seeing here, where it goes across and works on receptors, postsynaptic receptors on the muscle fibre. And these receptors are going to be cholinergic receptors, responding to acetylcholine. Just a wee set of sequential set of facts here, just to talk us through that process again. Nerve impulse triggers acetylcholine release. Acetylcholine acts on the postsynaptic receptors. Now these receptors, two main classes of cholinergic receptor, muscarinic and nicotinic. The muscarinic receptors are the ones that are found, for example, in the cardiac tissue, but at the neuromuscular junction, the skeletal neuromuscular junction, they are nicotinic cholinergic receptors. Once the acetylcholine works there, it generates what we know as an end plate potential. That brings the muscle fibre to threshold, and that allows the influx of calcium to the muscle and then gives you the contraction of the skeletal muscle. Now there's a variety of ways, we can affect that. Some things you may be familiar with. Now, botulinum toxin, or Botox as it's much better known, that blocks the release of acetylcholine. So that release by exocytosis from the synaptic vesicles into the synapse or the neuromuscular gap to go across, that doesn't happen. So if acetylcholine doesn't cross over and work on the muscle fibre, the muscle will not contract and will rather relax. That's why botulinum toxin or Botox is given to minimise wrinkles. Wrinkles appear on our features because of facial movements, and they become more pronounced when you move your muscles of your face. So for example, if you frown or raise your eyebrows, the wrinkles in the forehead and your brow will appear much deeper. If you lose the ability to move those muscles to the same degree, that will minimise the look or appearance of the wrinkles. That's why people take Botox for cosmetic purposes. The other one is curare. Curare is an alkaloid plant extract compound that blocks the acetylcholine receptor. Now, this one stops the acetylcholine coming out. This one, the acetylcholine is still released, but it can't gain access to the nicotinic receptor because of the presence of the curare. So the muscle no longer contracts. Curare is one of the main things, I say, it's extracted from plants. It's often referred to as some of what they call the arrowhead poisons. In some of the peoples in the countries of the world where there's a jungle population, a population living kind of in, away from the sort of main cities, living in the sort of deeper parts of the country. If they still use traditional hunting methods, they may well use arrows that are dipped in substances containing curare. Because what that does is, it means that when they fire it at the animal, if they're hunting, the animal, it doesn't necessarily kill the animal, but once the curare gets into the system, it stops the acetylcholine from working, the muscles can no longer contract, and therefore you can get a level of paralysis. We've also got the organophosphates. The organophosphates have become better known as the nerve gases that you often hear referred to in chemical warfare. These organophosphates inhibit acetylcholinesterase. Now, acetylcholinesterase is the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine. You only want acetylcholine working on its postsynaptic nicotinic receptors when there is an action potential. Therefore, if the motor neuron fires, the muscle contracts. When the motor neuron stops firing, you want muscle contraction to stop. How does that happen? Well, we break down the acetylcholine and we take it back up. The breakdown is using acetylcholinesterase, an enzyme that breaks it down. So if you inhibit that, you prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, the acetylcholine stays in the gap and continues to work. So whereas the previous two gave you complete paralysis because the muscle wouldn't contract, this one, the muscle is continuously contracted. Now the key thing here is, although we talk about skeletal muscle being primarily all about movement, there is one really important sheet of skeletal muscle in our body, and that's the diaphragm. Now, if you stop the diaphragm from contracting either by constantly relaxing it with the previous two, or constantly contracting it with this, then the individual or the animal or whatever will lose the ability to move the diaphragm and therefore will no longer be able to breathe. There is also an autoimmune disorder known as myasthenia gravis. You're probably familiar with autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune disorders are where the body mounts an immune attack on a part of it that's meant to be there, but for some reason is recognised as being foreign. In myasthenia gravis, antibodies are raised against the nicotinic N2 receptor. And what these antibodies do is they bind to the receptor and block it. If these antibodies block the receptor, the acetylcholine can't gain access, and if the acetylcholine can't gain access, the muscle cannot contract. So with myasthenia gravis, you get skeletal muscle weakening, and eventually the muscle could stop functioning altogether. Now, that's just a small selection of things that show you that the ways that you can interfere with the transmission, if you like. What you've got to think about though is, a lot of what we've talked about so far appears to be bad news, stopping your breathing, etc. So why then would you want to have groups of drugs that act at this junction? What value do these ones have? Now, there are various ways to classify them. There's ones that we can give that inhibit the enzyme that breaks acetylcholine down. That will cause the elevation of acetylcholine levels. We can inhibit the release of the compound, like Botox, which we've said already has cosmetic value, but there's more to it than that. And then we've got the neuromuscular blockers, which seem to fly in the face of everything we've said. Why would you want to have a complete block of skeletal muscle contraction? So we're going to look at each of these in turn and discuss the value and the usefulness of them. What we've got up here in this diagram, though, is, if you look at it, it's basically a generic synapse with acetylcholine in it. And the acetylcholine is being released, and as the acetylcholine is released, it goes down across and works on the postsynaptic nicotinic receptor, which is down here. What this shows you is there are various things that can upset that. So we've got acetylcholine. We've said it's broken down into choline and acetate to deactivate it. The choline can then be taken back up and reused, recycled to make more acetylcholine. It's released by the process of exocytosis. So what we can do is, we can work here to block the release, we can work here to block the reuptake, we can work here to block the enzyme, and we can work here to block the receptor. And we're going to look at examples of a number of these different ways to manipulate the neuromuscular junction. So, the inhibitors. The enzyme acetylcholinesterase is there to break down acetylcholine, to stop it having a prolonged action. If you block the enzyme, then you will prolong the effects of the acetylcholine. Now, these drugs are non-selective. That is, they don't just stop the breakdown at the skeletal neuromuscular junction. They stop the breakdown wherever acetylcholine is being released. So these will have an effect at both nicotinic and muscarinic receptors. So where do we find these? Well, N2 are the ones we are talking about, nicotinic 2. They're the ones at the neuromuscular junction. But we've got N1, they're found in the central nervous system when acetylcholine is working. And they're also the ones that are found in the postsynaptic membrane of the ganglia, in the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways. And then we've got the muscarinic, found in the central nervous system, and also at the junction in the parasympathetic, where acetylcholine works on the organs. So you can see there, because they're working in the brain, they're working in the ganglia, in the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways, they're working at the organ location in the parasympathetic, you're going to have a likelihood here that there's a lot of things these could do that would be, if you like, considered to be side effects. So why are you using them if they've got the potential for so many side effects? Their major clinical use is in myasthenia gravis. If you remember what we said was, the antibodies that are being released block the receptor. So therefore, by giving acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, you increase the amount of acetylcholine in the gap, and that increases the likelihood of the acetylcholine being able to compete with the antibodies. So therefore, it overcomes the muscle weakening that can occur with myasthenia gravis. So it's a competitive interaction, both the antibodies and the acetylcholine competing for the same receptors. So you skew the game in favour of acetylcholine by preventing it from being broken down, stays around longer in larger concentrations, and wins out. Some examples there, you've got distigmine, edrophonium, neostigmine and pyridostigmine. Again, with the exception of the edrophonium, the other ones are fairly easy to recognise because they've got the same ending of S-T-I-G-M-I-N-E. So stigmine, 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 di, neo and pyrido, the three of the four examples we've got up there. Botulinum toxin we've already mentioned. Botulinum toxin A, to give it its full Sunday name, comes from Clostridium botulinum. Now, you've all probably heard of botulism, yeah, which is not. You can see why Botox is given the name Botox and is not constantly referred to as botulinum toxin. That would probably be quite off-putting for people if they gave it its full name. What it does is it decreases the release of acetylcholine from the vesicles. It is potentially very toxic, but if you give it in small enough concentrations locally, not enough of it will get into the system to cause systemic effects. You give it as a complex between the botulinum toxin A and hemagglutinin. and that gets given into the affected muscle, and it kind of, if you like, it dissipates over time, so it can be effective for a number of weeks. It first came into its own really because I've always said acetylcholine works at the skeletal neuromuscular junction. One other thing that you've got is it works. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that promotes sweat production. So if an individual is suffering from excessive sweat production, the sweat glands under the arms, for example, can receive local injection. That inhibits the acetylcholine release from the neuron, therefore inhibits the stimulation of the gland and reduces the amount of sweating. Although now it's much better known for this, for the Botox, for the cosmetic, the anti-wrinkle aspect of it. Now, the other ones are the neuromuscular blockers. And that can seem like a bit of a strange idea. Why would you want to stop your skeletal muscles contracting altogether? Why would you want to block those postsynaptic receptors? And really the most common reason for doing that is pre-surgery. So, if you've ever had an operation under general anaesthetic, you will usually be given some type of sedative, if you like, to relax you. Then you will be given an intravenous injection of anaesthetic to put you under, and then you get your gaseous anaesthetic for the maintenance. In addition to that, you will be given a neuromuscular blocker. Now, that would then cause the muscles to stay relaxed, which is quite good during an operation. You wouldn't want spontaneous contractions or as you cut through something for it to flick and contract, because that could do a lot of damage to both the medical staff and also to yourself. But the other thing is, if you block the acetylcholine, you block the diaphragm. That's why the patients would be ventilated. The good thing about these drugs is they have a level of specificity. They don't, whereas if you affect the acetylcholine release, you're potentially affecting it at every receptor. Here, these drugs only block the N2 receptors, so you don't have N1 or M activity. That minimises then the impact that these drugs have on the wider autonomic function of the body, because it's not interacting with these receptors. The drugs are, in structural terms, very similar to the structure of acetylcholine, and what that does is it gives them a very strong affinity for the receptor. But because they're blockers, thinking way back to the earlier lectures, an antagonist, we said, has a higher level of affinity and a low level or no activity. So these things are likely to bind but not do anything. All they do is prevent the acetylcholine gaining access to the receptor. Now this is the structure of the receptor. And what the acetylcholine does is, the acetylcholine is a ligand-gated ion channel at N2. So thinking back to our receptor structure, and we used this as an example back then. So it's a long-chain protein that's folded multiple times in structure to create a transmembrane pore. And when acetylcholine works on it, here, at the two binding sites on the two alpha portions of the molecule, that opens up a sodium channel. Sodium comes into the cell, causing a depolarization of the muscle fibre that leads subsequently to a muscle action potential, entry of calcium, contraction of the muscle. So what we're doing is we're bringing in the neuromuscular blockers, and what they're doing now, they're working here and here so that this can't gain access anymore. Therefore, you don't get muscle contraction, you get muscle relaxation. Two main classes, non-depolarising and depolarising. And I'll explain the difference between those two now. The non-depolarising neuromuscular blockers, often referred to simply as the muscle relaxants. As we said, they compete with acetylcholine because they have a high affinity for the receptor. and so therefore they prevent the transmission of the impulses. Interestingly enough, these also have the ability to inhibit the release presynaptically of acetylcholine. So not only are you blocking the action of the acetylcholine that's already been released, you're minimising the amount of subsequent release as well. So that's why they're highly effective muscle relaxants. These are derivatives of the curare alkaloids that we mentioned, the arrowhead poisons. These are synthetic derivatives which are developed to have a high level of specificity for the M2 nicotinic cholinergic receptor. And the examples kind of bear that out when you look at the names: tubocurarin, vericonium, rocuronium. So there's a similarity in the name. These have a relatively slow onset of action though, so they need to be taken in advance of when you actually want the relaxation to happen. We then have the depolarising neuromuscular junctions. Now, depolarising means excitation. This seems to fly in the face of what we've just said. What we mentioned was that these depolarising neuromuscular blockers, that means they bind to the receptor. They don't get broken down by acetylcholinesterase, but when they bind, they actually cause a depolarisation. So they actually, at the beginning, do exactly what acetylcholine does. So at first you're thinking, surely that means they're agonists, but no. The excessive amount of depolarisation they cause, that they produce, causes what we know as fasciculations, which lead to a desensitization of the receptor. So it's almost like these drugs get in there first. They bind to the receptor, they overstimulate it, so that when the acetylcholine comes along, the receptors are desensitized and can't respond to the acetylcholine. One of the best known examples of that is Suxamethonium. That's the main agent in this class. These ones are good because, unlike the other class, the non-depolarising, these have a rapid onset and a short duration, which is kind of what you want. You want that to have that level of fast onset, slow offset, so that you can give it for an operation, it does its job, and then it stops working. So the use of these compounds is, as it says there, rapid sequence induction anaesthesia. So when you're wanting to allow intubation, so if you're wanting things to kick off quickly, what you can do then is, if you want to intubate someone prior to an operation, if you give this medication alongside the anaesthetic that you've given, very quickly the skeletal muscle will relax, and it's much easier then to intubate at that point. It's also useful as a muscle relaxant when to stop over excessive contraction of skeletal muscle when a patient's getting electroconvulsive therapy or ECT. The doses we're talking about here are about 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram IV, and you'll get the onset of the relaxation within about 1 minute, and it lasts 5 to 10 minutes. So this is obviously for relatively short-term procedures or quick fixes for something like the anticonvulsive impact that we talked about. They do, however, have a number of adverse effects, and these adverse effects are related in part to the action at certain doses on the other muscarinic nicotinic receptors. So they can cause, well, what does acetylcholine do? Acetylcholine is inhibitory on the heart, so therefore these can cause bradycardia, but that's much more commonly seen in children. They can also produce hyperkalemia, or high levels of potassium in the blood, and they can cause raised intraocular pressure and intracranial pressure, so they can actually start to disturb both levels of consciousness and vision. Also on top of that, if a patient has a defective cholinesterase enzyme, they won't be able to break these compounds down, and that can cause a prolonged paralysis. You lose that short action of it. They can also, as with a lot of compounds, an IV injection of them can lead to anaphylactic shock. They can cause malignant hyperpyrexia. So a significantly large raising of the body temperature, and they can also produce myalgia. So just got a couple of tables here just to finish off, to let you peruse at your leisure, just showing you the different types of non-depolarising, the rate of onset, how long they work for, and whether they have any kind of side effects. And similarly, on the non-depolarising ones that we mentioned, they're used for maintenance of paralysis because of their slow onset. So you can afford to have them because they last a little bit longer as well. And rocuronium is one of the newer ones that's good because it's as effective as suxamethonium in the rapid sequence. So although, as we said, these drugs are usually slower in onset, the rocuronium is one that's kind of bucks that trend. So just to summarise then, you need to understand the neuromuscular junction, how the action potentials coming down the motor neurons release acetylcholine, how that goes across and works on cholinergic receptors, which are nicotinic N2 receptors, and then the acetylcholine will be broken down and taken back up. And there are a variety of ways that we can interfere with that process. We can block the release of acetylcholine, block the receptors for acetylcholine, and interfere with the enzymes that break it down. And all of those will alter the muscular contraction for a variety of different clinical and non-clinical reasons. Thank you.